So my theory about Sam Harris is that when he talks about Islam, it is to portray Muslims as different from Christians and from people of other religious faiths. Sam Harris's goal is to poison the minds of Christians in the West so that they view Muslims as foreign, as alien, and people who don't belong in Christian society. So here is Sam Harris arguing with Cenk Uygur, and he brings up an absolutely brilliant point.
But here's a science experiment. In this same year, you have people living in the same kinds of conditions, right? I mean, the Christian Palestinians have to go through the same checkpoints as Muslim Palestinians, right, in Israel.
Well, I have an answer to that.
Okay, what is the answer?
Okay, so it's not specifically in Palestine, but in Northern Ireland, what did they do when they felt they were oppressed and they were occupied? They bombed civilians, right? What did the Tamils do in Sri Lanka? They bombed civilians.
You've changed
when they felt
but
that
you've
they were
changed the
oppressed
case.
and occupied,
Listen.
they always bomb civilians.
No, I can talk, no, but they don't always, because we are not seeing the Christian suicide bombers.
So the brilliant point is, where are the Palestinian Christian suicide bombers? If they're all living under the same occupation and the only variable is religion, then it must be the religion that is to blame, right? So this interview was published in October 2014, okay? So now let's take a look at Sam Harris talking at the Beyond Belief conference in 2006. Here's Sam Harris talking to Scott Atran.
So one thing I would say to you, Scott, is that you have some, if Islam is really orthogonal to this problem, or a variable number 10 on your list of variables, a few things you should explain. One is, where are the Palestinian Christian suicide bombers? You know, there are, most of Palestinians are Muslims, obviously, but there are Palestinian Christians who have to go through the same checkpoints. They suffer the same humiliations by Israelis. I mean, it seems to me this is practically a science experiment. We have the same people speaking the same language, living in the same deplorable conditions. One group rather reliably forms a death cult, and the other doesn't.
After this question, they discuss Buddhism and kamikazes, and then Harris comes back to his original question of whether there have been any Christian suicide bombers amongst Palestinians.
You get about 70% in a random sample among Christians for support for suicide terrorism, depending on threat perception. Now, the reason there aren't almost none, although Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigades does allow Christians, the reason that...
Have there been Christian suicide bombers?
No.
Okay.
The reason that there isn't is because the particular groups that are formed are, actually there have been PFLP suicide bombers. Palestinian Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. There have been 6 cases, I believe. There's a mostly Christian Marxist organization.
So this happened in 2006. And in 2014, Harris asks Cenk the same question. Harris knows the answer, of course. He's just betting that Cenk is unaware of the data and bets correctly. And here again, in 2010, in a debate with Robert Wright, let's see what Harris says.
Now, and I ask you, where are all of the Palestinian Christian suicide bombers? I think there probably has been one. Okay, but by and large, I mean, there are Palestinian Christians. They are Palestinian. They live in the occupied territories. They are not reliably blowing themselves up.
There probably has been one. He knows the answer to the question, of course, but says, I think there probably has been one. But he really can't be sure. He's just throwing it out there. Probably one.
Now, and I ask you, where are all of the Palestinian Christian suicide bombers? I think there probably has been one.
So even though in 2006, Atran tells him that there's been 6, he says there probably has been one. And according to Theodore Said, who's a contributor for Mondoweiss, there have been a total of 10 suicide bombings. And that's just Palestinian Christians, not counting Lebanese or German. Wait, what? German suicide bombings? What the? During World War II, the German Luftwaffe, or the German Air Force, created a volunteer suicide squadron called a Leonidas Squadron to use against the British. 70 young Germans volunteered. While they were never used against the British, because the Germans didn't think they needed to use them, near the end of the war, when things were more desperate for the Germans, 35 of the Leonidas Squadron were used against the Russians. They were all Christians who flew to their deaths in Russia. But if you bring this up, or if you bring up the Tamil Tigers who conducted 400 suicide bombings, including one that killed the Prime Minister of India, or if you bring up the kamikazes, these can all be explained away. The PFLP, or the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, which Scott Atran mentions when he mentions the Palestinian Christian suicide bombers, was founded by a Christian Palestinian, George Habash, whose family fled from their homes from the IDF when Habash was just 19. But Muslims are fundamentally different because their fundamentals are different, as Harris likes to say. They don't do it for reasons of nationalism or patriotism like the Germans or the Tamils or the Japanese. When Muslims do it, it's because they want to go to paradise and fuck 72 virgins. And this idea, of course, is not racist at all because Muslims are in a race. Sam Harris is just one layer deep at best. His goal is to prove to Christians that Israel is awesome and Palestinians are violent because they're part of a death cult religion. His goal is to prove to Christians that Muslims are foreign, Muslims are alien and cannot be reasoned with, and they don't belong in a Christian society.
So you see this massacre in the Christmas market, and I think many people will feel, what is the fucking point of having more Muslims in your society?